statement. Jadi kita mau mencoba ya ngejar 5 target yang konkret. Yang pertama adalah didirikannya Pandemic Preparedness Fund. Jadi kayak bukan kayak IMF sih, tapi mirip lah, adanya dana cadangan yang bisa diakses oleh negara-negara yang membutuhkan pada saat pandemi. Yang kedua, kita ingin membangun mekanisme formal agar uang yang masuk di fund ini bisa diubah, bisa digunakan untuk emergency medical countermeasures, untuk nyediain vaksin, nyediain obat-obatan, therapeutics, atau nyediain testing equipment during crisis. Karena kalau ada health crisis, yang diperlukan bukan hanya uang kan. Indonesia punya uang nggak bisa akses vaksin, nggak bisa beli ventilator waktu itu ya. Jadi yang kedua yang kita mau pakai adalah untuk itu. Yang ketiga, kita mau link genome sequence network. Kita mau gabung tuh, supaya kalau ada the next pandemic, dimanapun dia keluar, ketahuannya cepat. Gitu ya, sama seperti waktu di Wuhan kan. Yang keempat, kita mau harmonize global health protocol standard. Jadi kalau ini pandemi ini pengalamannya kan begitu pandemi semua lockdown. Begitu lockdown, movement of people cannot be done. Gitu. Kalau orang yang nggak gerak, pilotnya kan nggak bisa jalan. Gitu. Kru kapalnya nggak bisa jalan. Akibatnya apa? Movement of goods berhenti juga. Sehingga akibatnya macet itu ekonomi karena nggak ada movement of goods and movement of people. Jadi kita pengen nanti kalau ada pandemi lagi jangan sampai begitu, gitu ya. Harus tetap kita pikirkan orang-orang yang dites aman atau udah divaksin tetap boleh bergerak sehingga nggak berhenti sama sekali itu pergerakan orang dan pergerakan barang sehingga ekonominya berhenti benar ya. Itu kan masalah kesehatan jadi masalah ekonomi itu, jadi masalah sosial bisa jadi masalah politik. Nah yang kelima, kita mau benar-benar dapetin redistribusi dari global manufacturing sama global research hub, terutama di negara-negara selatan. Karena negara maju kan biasanya negara-negara utara, ini negara-negara selatan. Nah progresnya udah ada, kayak FIF itu udah terbentuk, gitu ya. Nanti bisa diupdate di sini. Udah lebih dari 1 billion US dollar malah udah di pledge. Sekarang kita tinggal ngomongin yang nomor 2. Kalau uangnya udah ada, gimana caranya itu bisa jadi akses ke barang? Karena barangnya kan umumnya dimiliki swasta. Kayak vaksin ini kan yang punya semua swasta, bukan pemerintah ya. Nah gimana kita sekarang lagi bicara juga dengan teman-teman global pharmaceutical industry supaya kalau terjadi pandemi lagi tolong dong dibuatkan social commitment supaya bisa dapat akses yang adil gitu, ke emergency medical countermeasures. Itu emergency medical countermeasures itu 3, vaksin, therapeutics atau obat-obatan dan diagnostic tools, alat tes. Kalau pandemi kan 3 itu biasanya. Yang nomor 3 mengenai network, itu tadi ada orang G8 duduk dan sudah progressing. Kita harus bisa at least menyambungkan lah koneksi antara one global lab with the other global lab. Terutama pada saat pandemi. Supaya kalau pandemi meledak, sharing dari pathogen information ini cepat, gampang. Sehingga researcher dimanapun dia berada bisa tahu. Yang keempat, teman-teman bisa lihat di sana kan, kita pakai QR code standarnya WHO, udah bisa tuh buat vaksin sama testing. Nanti segala macam vaksin, segala macam tes, itu bisa pakai di QR code aja tuh. Tinggal di tap seperti paspor, oh udah ketahuan orang ini boleh jalan apa enggak. Ya baik di departure maupun di arrival. Baik itu kapal, laut, segala macam. Jadi dengan demikian kalau terjadi pandemi enggak kemudian freeze gitu kegiatan ekonominya karena manusianya nggak bisa bergerak, manusia nggak bisa bergerak, ya sekarang kan kapal tetap aja masih ada yang supirnya gitu kan, pesawat terbang masih ada supirnya, kalau nggak ada orangnya nggak bisa jalan sendiri tuh kapal atau pesawat udara. Itu sekarang kita mau pilot project, hampir semua negara G20 mau, karena udah ada kan contohnya, jadi udah tinggal di pilot project kan saja, itu juga udah maju. Yang kelima tuh yang global manufacturing hub sama research. Itu yang Afrika Selatan sudah mulai dengan WHO, Brazil, Argentina juga sudah mulai dengan WHO, sedangkan Indonesia sama India kita akan jalan. Mungkin dengan akses ke beberapa perusahaan vaksin dengan teknologi tinggi yang mau masuk di Indonesia. Karena melihat populasinya kita kan besar. Ya. Kalau India udah punya sih pabrik vaksin besar, tapi belum yang mRNA teknologi. Karena mRNA ini bisa 100 hari. Kalau ada pandemi lagi, ketahuan jenis virusnya dengan teknologi mRNA itu bisa 100 hari langsung vaksinnya siap untuk uji klinis. Karena bikinnya kan lebih kayak apa? Kayak biological engineering gitu. Ya, pakai komputer kan, nggak usah bikinnya benar-benar masukin ke binatang dulu, ditarik antibodinya pakai teknologi yang lama. Jadi kira-kira gitu tuh. 5 itu sih yang kita diskusikan tadi dan kita update progresnya. Surprisingly banyak yang juga terkejut kok bisa sampai ke sini, ya, terutama yang pembentukan Financial Intermediary Fund yang dikelola World Bank itu ya. Udah cukup jauh, dan sekarang tinggal kita pastikan masih ada waktu sampai Oktober, the second Health Minister sama Finance Minister meeting. Ya. Kalau itu bisa selesai dengan rapi, November pada saat leaders meeting di Bali, insya Allah udah siap. Kelima deliverables tadi. Gitu. Ya. No, Bapak Tedros sudah datang with a wonderful batik shirt gitu. Jadi you are being ini apa? Camouflage, no, just, yeah, you're on time. I'm a little bit early. I would like to meet with the Indonesian journalist.
Okay.
Dian, please, Dian.
Yes, sir. Before we start the press conference, can we please have a photo session? Because you two are wearing batik, and we are very proud of our batik.
This is a promotion, for you.
Yuk di foto yuk, mumpung pakai batik. Okay, that was enough. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and honored colleagues. Welcome, and thank you to all the members of media and journalists that has made time to come in person to Yogyakarta, Indonesia, or by virtual to participate in this event. Presiding with us, Director General of WHO, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and His Excellency Minister of Health of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Budi Gunadi Sadikin. As you all know, this morning, on Monday, 20th of June, 2022, the first G20 Health Ministerial Meeting has commenced. I would like to invite Minister Budi to say a few words, giving his reflections on today's meeting. Minister Budi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank you, Dr. Tedros. He is my brother, my senior in health sector. I learned a lot from Dr. Tedros. And I thank Dr. Tedros because he is wearing a wonderful Indonesian Jogja batik. Yeah? You see the color is a very Jogja. It's not Cirebon or other cities batik. So I welcome Dr. Tedros to come to Indonesia. So to give you a background, Indonesia presidency, Pak Jokowi would like to have only 3 agendas. The first and the most important for him is the strengthening the global health architecture. The second agenda is about energy transition, and the third agenda is about digital transformations. So I'm responsible for the first agenda. And second, Mr. President would like to see concrete results. He said, it is not the time for us to keep discussing and come out with formal communications or joint statement. We need to have something concrete. So at that time, we proposed to him, those are 5 key deliverables that we would like to provide to him as his legacy for G20 presidency on health. The first one is the establishment of the Pandemic and Preparedness and Response Fund. So this is a pool of money that can be used by low and middle income country if there is a future pandemic happens. The second deliverable is we need to get to formalize an agreement, not only among global institutions, but also ideally with private sector, how we can translate this money into timely and equitable access to emergency medical countermeasures, which is vaccine, therapeutics, and diagnostics. Why I need to discuss about private sector? Because the one that produce vaccine is actually private sectors. So we need to make sure that we have like a social agreement, a social contract, or whatever we name it. When another pandemic happens, there is a cooperation between government and private sector to accelerate the development of therapeutics, vaccine, and diagnostic, but also the private sector to contribute, providing timely but also just access. So like rich country, they can pay, but lower and middle income country or poor country, they cannot pay. So the discussion with private sector is ongoing. And we would like to make sure that WHO as the global health standard take a leading role in it, and also that there was an example, accelerator, also initiated by WHO. It is informal, but we would like to formalize, so we don't reinvent the wheel. The third deliverables is we feel the importance to network the global sequence lab. Because we understand when pathogen appears, it can be everywhere, every corner of the world. And then we need capabilities to quickly identify what type of pathogens they are. Pathogens can be bacteria, virus, or parasite. So these are the three dangerous things, living things then that can create a pandemic. So at least that is the biologists teach me after 17 months in health industry. So we need to network this lab, ideally even during normal time, but at least during pandemic, we can exchange information about pathogen genome sequence data quickly. And we have been discussing about this. Several discussion led also by WHO in Lake Como, by Somia, the chief WHO scientist, a report to Tedros discussing about how we can establish a formal network of data sharing. And the fourth deliverables is we would like to also to standardize, to harmonize, not standardize, harmonize the global health protocol standard. Because we realize as an economist, when health crisis happens, then the response, the health response will be a lockdown. So no people move. When no people move, no goods move. Before to move goods, you need the pilot and you need, what do you call it, the crew of the ships. If the crew of the ships and the pilot cannot move, of course the goods cannot move. The goods cannot move, then economy doesn't move. So and that the health crisis become an economic crisis. Economic crisis becomes social crisis. Social crisis become political crisis. So we learned something during this pandemic that we need to find a way that people that safe, without compromising health safety, can still move and make the economy moving. And we use the WHO standard also, again, thanks to WHO team that support us. The QR code is digitalized now. It's not only about vaccine certificate, but also maybe testing certificate. And we can add more information to it. And WHO will be the custodian of the, what they call it, the public key, the security component. So every country will trust. They're member of WHO anyway. So that the data will be safe. The fifth deliverables is we would like to redistribute the global manufacturing hub and global research hub, especially in G20 countries members in the South, because the South is usually less developed than the North. And WHO has started with vaccine hubs in South Africa. Dr. Tedros can explain more, and also in Brazil and Argentina. And now we are proposing Indonesia and India for the South Asia. India has the capacity already. We also have, not as big as India, but we need to have access to this mRNA vaccine technology, because this is a technology that we can produce vaccine in less than maybe in 100 days. Yeah? That is the objective. That if there is another pandemic, in 100 days, we can develop vaccine that's ready to go to clinical trial. So it can be used. So those are the 5 key deliverables. And during this meeting, we updated all the health ministers about the progress. I will explain to you the progress later on to give Pak Tedros time. And we are quite optimistic that we can move forward. We still have time until the second health ministers meeting that will be done on October, and hopefully we can finish everything and put it on the leaders meeting on November. So I will stop here, Dia. Then I need to give some time also to my brother.
Thank you, Minister Budi. I would now like to invite Dr. Tedros to add any further comments before opening the floor to questions. Please do.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama.
So I'm picking up words, not only the close. I think Minister Budi said I have the same batik, but mine is with a wing. And I read what it means, and it's serenity, which I like, by the way. When they describe this shirt, call it serenity. That's very important, I think, for every person. So I'm glad, not only about the clothes, but the message also is very important. So first of all, thank you to the members of the press for joining us. And I would also like to thank my friend Minister Budi and Indonesia for their leadership and hospitality in hosting this meeting of G20 health ministers. I'm very pleased to see that reported cases and deaths from COVID-19 here in Indonesia are now at very low levels. Congratulations, Minister. And that more than 60% of the population is fully vaccinated. However, that is not the case in every country in the world. Indonesia is one of the few countries with continuing transmission, decreasing testing and sequencing, and 40% of the world's population still unvaccinated. The pandemic is not over. It's vital that all countries continue to vaccinate, especially those most at risk, including health workers and people aged over 60, of course with the target of the 70%. I believe Indonesia can reach that because it's already 60%. At the same time, we must all learn the painful lessons the pandemic is teaching us. And that was the focus of our discussion here this morning. At the World Health Assembly last month, WHO presented a proposal for a new global architecture for health emergency preparedness and response. It includes 10 key recommendations for stronger governance, stronger systems and tools, stronger financing, and stronger WHO. One of those recommendations is for the creation of a financial intermediary fund, as Minister Budi said, or what we call a FIF, to support countries to strengthen their defenses against epidemics and pandemics. This morning, we had a productive discussion on what the FIF would look like and how it would operate. Crucially, the governance of the FIF must be inclusive, with a structure that enables representation of all countries. And it must also be coherent with the other parts of the global architecture for health emergency preparedness and response. That includes another of WHO's 10 recommendations to develop a new platform for the rapid development of and equitable access to vaccines, tests, treatments, and other tools during future pandemics. This platform is also a key focus of Indonesia's G20 presidency. We also discussed another G20 priority under Minister Budi, which is expanding local production of vaccines, tests, and treatments. This is another essential part of WHO's work to keep the world safer. At the moment, production of these vital tools is concentrated in too few companies, in too few countries. Expanding local production in all regions around the world is a priority for WHO, and we're glad that Indonesia from this region is willing to take that challenge. And as Minister Budi said, Indonesia has a potential already, capacity for local production. We also had a constructive discussion about other pressing health challenges, including tuberculosis, antimicrobial resistance, and the necessity of a One Health approach. Each of these issues is connected with making the world safer. So thank you again, once again, Minister Budi and Indonesia, and I look forward to your questions. Again, terima kasih.
Sama-sama. Thank you, Dr. Tedros. We will now start the question and answer session. For our online participants, please type your questions into the chat and I will read them out. We'll start with the first question. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Sinta from Tempo. My question for Dr. Tedros. First, this morning you encouraged G20 to a forum to refocus and TB globally and adapting methodology financing. So could you explain more detail and what is the most important as a strategy to eliminate TB on 2030? And the secondly, we heard that Dr. Tedros will visit the community health center tomorrow, or puskesmas. Could you explain more detail? What is your goal tomorrow? Kemudian untuk Pak Budi, kami mendengar hari ini delegasi Rusia datang ya Pak untuk forum G20 ini. Nah kami ingin tahu, karena sebelumnya negara-negara G7 itu sempat mengatakan akan memboikot, bagaimana sikap Indonesia atau respon pemerintah Indonesia, kemudian apakah di G20 ini Amerika datang untuk mensupport atau mendukung G20 ini, begitu. Terus pertanyaan yang
sorry.
Oh nggak apa-apa ya. Oke. Tadi Pak soal yang global manufacturing itu Indonesia nanti selanjutnya apakah akan lebih fokus lagi untuk membuat vaksin? Tadi kan dijelaskan untuk bahwa vaksinnya masih dikelola swasta gitu ya Pak. Nah nanti seperti apa yang akan dilakukan pemerintah Indonesia untuk selanjutnya gitu? Terima kasih.
Okay, we'll start with Dr. Tedros, please.
Thank you very much. On TB, as you know, it's a major killer. It's actually the second one in terms of mortality from the infectious diseases. The first one now is COVID. And as you also know, TB has been with us for millennia. And it's very disappointing actually that COVID is continuing to kill around 1.5 million people every year. And not only that, average 10 million people get ill because of TB. So the reason I raised it during our discussion earlier today is to really give more attention to TB. Because we are now talking about pandemic preparedness and response and worried about the next pandemic, but we have to also understand that there is a major killer like TB, which still is killing people, and that the attention we give to TB should not be minimized because we're investing in pandemic preparedness and response. I even said specifically that the fifth we're establishing, I'm really glad that a consensus has been made and thank you to Indonesia for its leadership. We have a consensus in establishing the fifth now. But the funding that goes to fifth should be a fresh one. It should be new funding. And donors who provide funding to TB should not divert their funding from TB to the new fifth mechanism. They should continue to support TB. Not only they should continue to support, but I believe that TB needs more investment. Forget about diverting funds from TB to other mechanisms like fifth. But my expectation is that the TB funding should actually increase. And there are many things we have already been doing on TB. For instance, new vaccines. You have seen how we developed vaccines for COVID in just less than a year. So we need to have that kind of commitment for TB because it's a killer. And that's why more investment is needed in TB, not decreasing. Then on tomorrow's visit, I was looking forward to the visit. I'm really glad that Indonesia is focusing on primary health care. We were discussing this with my friend, Minister Budi. You know, that you're now focused on primary health care, you know, to really build and, you know, re-energize the primary health care. And I believe this is the right direction. You know, be it for pandemic preparedness and response, or the surveillance that Minister Budi was saying. By the way, the surveillance, which is very important for pandemic preparedness and response, and be it the prevention of non-communicable diseases, primary health care is central, which is very close to the community and which can serve the community from, you know, really close distance. But not only that, if you have primary health care, they can also provide services house to house. So I'm glad Indonesia is focused on primary health care, and I was looking forward to visit. However, I have another, you know, emerging commitment in Jakarta. So I had to leave Yogyakarta earlier than I planned. But I will still be in Indonesia, but I will be in Jakarta tomorrow, and I have some activities there. So that's why. But I will follow up, you know, the reform that's already being led by the minister, and WHO is fully behind this reform. And we will support Indonesia in any way possible. But the health sector you have started, the health sector reform that you have started is really the right approach, especially focusing on primary health care. And I have to congratulate His Excellency the President and also the Minister for focusing on primary health care, which is very important for infectious disease prevention and control, and also for non-communicable diseases. It's the center of health care. Primary health care is the center of primary health care. Thank you.
Yes, all countries are coming, all of them, G20 members, into this meeting, and I think that will reflect the acknowledgement of every G20 members on Indonesia, our president, and Indonesia presidency of G20, and we really thanks all members country for acknowledging the Indonesian presidency. And by the way, whatever your nationality are, you can still get COVID. Whether you are living in Alaska, you're living in Australia, you're living in the Middle East, you know, whatever nationality, you can get COVID. And as Dr. Tedros mentioned, you need to be vaccinated twice. Okay? On the second questions about vaccine, we have to realize that most of the vaccine that we have now are produced by the private sector. So this overall handling of this pandemic is something that I strongly believe we cannot do this alone. The government itself cannot do this alone. We need to do this together. The government cannot do this exclusively as a government initiative, but we need to do this inclusively. The government cannot approach this as a program. We need to approach this as a movement, where every component of our communities, whether it's government, whether it's private sector, whether it's non-governmental organizations, we work together. Then we can solve and overcome this pandemic. So we in G20, Indonesia presidency, believe we need to work together. Not only in vaccine, but also therapeutics, diagnostic, how to impose health protocol standard and everything. Thank you.
Next question, yes.
Good evening. I'm Urara from NHK Japan. I would like to ask about monkeypox to Dr. Tedros. In today's meeting, did you discuss about the monkeypox outbreak before the emergency meeting this week?
Yeah, thank you. I think the general discussion we had covers monkeypox as well, if not really specific and detailed discussion on monkeypox. But as you rightly said, we will have an emergency committee meeting on Thursday to discuss, because the monkeypox is now in countries that has never been before, in more than 32 countries now. And of course, there is no deaths so far, but since it's moving into areas where it hasn't been there before, it's a matter of concern for us. So that's why we have we're hosting or we're convening the emergency committee meeting, and look forward to see their advice. I just wanted to have their advice on the changing situation in the monkeypox epidemiology. Thank you.
Okay, next question, back to that side.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, I'm Andira from C Today. So my first question is for Dr. Tedros. So regarding the financial intermediary fund proposal, what role that WHO will play in this, and also if we learn from this pandemic, there are still some gaps regarding like between the developed and underdeveloped countries. So how will you ensure that if there is another situation coming up through this FIF, it will not happen again? And the second question is for Minister Budi Gunadi Sadikin. So the first one is about the financial intermediary fund. So what role will WHO play in this? And also, like, how will your organization ensure that, because what we learned from this pandemic is that there are still gaps between developed and underdeveloped countries regarding the testing and also the vaccination. So how will you ensure that if we already get the fund, it will not happen again?
If we get what?
If there is another situation, similar situation happen in the future, it will not happen again. Like the gap will not happen again. And the second, for Minister Budi Gunadi Sadikin, you mentioned about the harmonized global health protocol standard. So could you explain more to that in detail, aside from the QR code? And also, how will it relates to the situation between, like, different countries might have different situation in transitioning from pandemic to endemic. So how will it relate to that? So that's all. Thank you.
Please answer.
Do you want to start first, or? Okay. So on the fifth, the role of WHO will be a technical lead. Just brief. That's the responsibility of WHO going to be, and we will make sure that the funding will be used based on, the technical evidence, plus in a way that could have the best impact. So that's going to be the responsibility of WHO, and this will be run by both the World Bank and WHO. Although it will be hosted in the World Bank. Then on the gaps, whether it will happen similar situation or not, it will depend on how well we implement the lessons we have learned from this pandemic. There are more than 300 recommendations. For instance, one of which is we need to have strong primary health care, and we need to focus on public health. As you know, even the most developed countries were surprised by this pandemic. It was a crisis in the whole world. No country can claim that they were not surprised by this virus. And one of the recommendations is to really give priority to primary health care, health promotion, disease prevention, early detection, and immediate response, the whole process. And primary health care is one of the recommendations, for instance, let's say, and Indonesia is already moving ahead with that. And this is one among more than 300 recommendations. FIFIF, another recommendation. There are other recommendations on governance, many process, system-focused recommendations, finance recommendations, and so on. If we keep the momentum, if we really truly learn from these lessons and implement faithfully and implement aggressively, then we can prevent the next one. If we don't, like what we see now, there is this, what do they call it, panic and neglect. When there is a problem, we panic and do something, like all the money even we invested or lost because of the COVID. But once that's behind us, then we go into neglect, meaning we just forget, and then we don't learn from our lessons, and we don't change things, and we're not serious about changing things. If that happens, then a pandemic like this and even more serious could happen. So what I'm trying to say is, it's in our hands. If we learn our lessons and say never again and implement the recommendations, the chances of preventing the next pandemic is very high. If we don't learn from these lessons, then neglect it and even forget what happened and don't change, then we will face another one even more serious. So I would like to use this opportunity to remind the world that we have to be serious about the lessons we're learning from this pandemic, and make sure that we implement the recommendations to prepare the world. As we speak now, by the way, we're in the middle of the pandemic. The world is not prepared. If another virus strikes again, another pandemic starts now, we are still not prepared. So that's why the speed is also very important. We need to move really fast to implement the recommendations in each and every country, and then we can prevent the next one. Thank you.
Yes.
So just to add on the fifth structure, there will be a governing entities, will be secretariat, the second, and there will be a trustees, and there will be a implementing entities. And again, the feedback that we receive from G20 countries is to be inclusive. So we will combining strength rather than separate or silo the strength. We are combining strength. And WHO strength is on the health technical lead. So it's very, very clear that the health sector will be led by WHO. The World Bank is strong in everything about money. You know, the name is the World Bank, so they are strong in money. So managing the money, how they raise fund, that is their strength. So but again, the objective is to combine the strength inclusively so we can move forward quickly with basically 4 basic entities: the governing entities, the secretariat, the trustees, and the implementing entities. And we split the role. And it's still under discussion. On the second question is related with the Global Health Protocol standard. Again, the main idea is every pandemic, the most logical health regulator response is to lockdown. However, if we would like to save humans' life by doing lockdown, then economy will stop. So people will dying not because of sickness, because people will dying because of hunger, economic issues. And then it will have a social impact, and then it will have a political impact. So we realize when the next pandemic happens, we need to establish a system where, although we are still doing lockdown to protect the transmissions of the diseases, we have an agreed mechanism, global health protocol mechanism, where people who are healthy or being certified as healthy can still move around and move the economy, moving the goods, between among countries. And for this, we need a system that have integrity. First, we need to understand that this guy is the guy. So in banking, we call it authentication. So we have to do a digital mechanism to authenticate that this guy is the guy. And then the second, we need to validate that this guy is safe. Because when you move, you have to make sure that your system can guarantee that the person that moves is really safe. So this we need to a digital system that validate that this guy has been tested safe or has been vaccinated safely. And the third, once you be able to authenticate that that person is that very person, then you validate that that person is actually healthy or safe, so they can move. The third, we have to make sure that this can be done efficiently. So that's why using digital technology, WHO platform, we can use this mechanism across the globe, because this system need to be standard. You cannot have one passport in a country and different format of passport in different country. Right? You need to have a standard. So if we can standardize or we can harmonize protocol in immigration, why can't we harmonize protocol in health? So keep the movement of people freely if they are healthy, the same as passport. If you are legitimate, you can move. But if you are not legitimate, you cannot move. The same thing. If you are healthy, you can move. If you are not healthy, you cannot move. And that is really depend on the systems on every country that need to be harmonized. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We have time for one more last question.
Thank you, Wahyudi from Straits Times. One question for Pak Budi. $1 billion pledge is an achievement you can get in a matter of weeks or months. Can you elaborate on this? What is an ideal amount? And can we get a glimpse or rough idea what would be the priority spending, whether on therapeutic, vaccine, diagnostic, and why? And one question for Dr. Tedros. How would you address on manufacturing hubs and research hubs? On manufacturing hubs, how do you address problem with pharmaceutical companies who are not willing to cooperate? And on the research hub, which may be more challenging, the same case, if they are not willing to share, is there anything WHO can do? Because we understand that research can it may mean to them a lot of investment money. So how you address these money-oriented pharmaceutical companies? Thank you.
Minister Budi first, or?
So I will answer first. Yes, the financing is needed to financing the gap, and the gap is identified. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Tedros, is 10.5 billion per annum. The gap is identified. So we established this fund, and some countries have pledged. The first one is the United States, $450 million US. The second is the European Union, $450 million US. And then it followed by Germany, 50 million euros, so around 52.7 million US dollar. The fourth one is Wellcome Trust, which is 10 million pounds sterling. So make it a little bit complicated, around 12.3 million US dollars. And then Indonesia, as a lower middle income country. We pledged $50 million. And then last week I went to a country and the minister gave me a letter that they will contribute 10 billion US, but he said, let the right person disclose the number tomorrow. So which country? There is another country, 10 billion. So total is slightly less 1.1 billion US. People say, oh, there is a gap between 1.1 billion to 10.5. But you know, to build the fund, it takes time. I'm a banker for 30 years. I understand how to raise fund. And 10.5 billion is not actually that big. We can raise that one. But it takes time. What I heard from World Bank senior officers, this fifth, World Bank has many fifth financial intermediary fund already being established. And this fifth is the fastest in terms of getting pledge or commitment. So in a very short period after the establishment, the fastest fifth, they can reach almost 1.1 billion commitment. So we are pretty sure that we can reach the 10.5 billion annual gap that we would like to fulfill.
Dr. Tedros, please.
Okay. No, thank you. On the pharma, on the mRNA hub. Yeah, on the mRNA hub, sorry, the sound coming from somewhere, so I was waiting until that's cleared. On the mRNA hub, it has two options. One, to get technology from existing, the existing one, that's from the pharma. That will help cutting the time needed because they don't need to go through clinical, through research and so on. So that's one option to get the technology from others. And the second is to develop it themselves in the mRNA hub itself. That takes time, but it's possible, and it has already been done. So the reason I'm saying this is the mRNA hub, of course, was established hoping that we would get the technology from the existing one from the pharma, but that's not the only option. In case we can't, then the mRNA hub can develop its own. And that's what exactly they did in South Africa. The Afrigen biologicals have already, Afrigen has already developed an mRNA vaccine, but it should go through all the trials, and it may take 3 to 4 years. But we're still asking the pharma, both Pfizer and Moderna, to transfer technology. So far, the response is not positive, but if they could provide, then the time needed to produce the product will be really short. I mean, it will be around nine months. So it's an issue of time. And then coming to the question, how do you get from the pharma the technology? One is the TRIPS, and WTO member states were negotiating on this, and they have agreed on some decisions last week, but that decision doesn't seem to be good enough because it has many caveats. But we will see if that could be a solution, but it doesn't seem so. The other solution is we have invited many to transfer through the CTAP, which they can use, but although there are two contributions, mainly diagnostics, and one of them I think is treatment, we haven't yet managed to succeed on that. but we will continue to push. So it's one is technology transfer, the other is proceeding with what we have started, developing a new product. The other thing what we should really understand is the mRNA technology transfer is not just for COVID. It's the establishment of the mRNA hub is a strategic investment to address the equity problems in vaccines we face with other technologies as well, or other vaccines or products. As you know, the mRNA technology can be used for malaria, TB, HIV, cancer, and others. So we shouldn't see it in, measure or judge the success of the mRNA hub based on what it can do with regard to COVID-19 or not. It's a strategic investment for the other diseases as well, and it should be seen as such. And that's why we need to have, as all possible options, whether it's transfer or developing its own technology. We need to address the equity issues through this establishment of the mRNA and local production in low and middle-income countries. So thank you, and terima kasih.
Sama-sama. Thank you so much, Dr. Tedros and Minister Budi, for your time. This concludes our press conference today. Apologies to those who didn't make it to their questions due to the limited time. With that, to all the members of the media and the press, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy our beautiful city of Yogyakarta. Good evening and see you next time.